All right, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back. We are here in the office again. It's Sunday afternoon. The sun is out, which is a freaking miracle because I feel like I haven't seen the sun in a good 5 or 6 weeks. So it is a nice day outside. Almost ashamed to be inside recording a video, but I was able to get out this morning and have a coffee with a friend, catch up, which was lovely, and it's given me a little bit of energy to get into this afternoon. So welcome back. The Illustrator here. This is video number 2, and today I thought I might take you guys through a little lesson on foreshortening. In this lesson specifically, how I foreshorten arms. So we'll be looking at how to break the arm down and how the muscles and things layer on top of each other when they're sort of foreshortened and facing the camera. So for those of you who don't know what foreshortening is, essentially it is this. I've got my hand, forearm, bicep, shoulder. They're all behind each other, which is foreshortening. All right. So when something is in front of something else, that means it's foreshortened. So essentially today I'm going to show you guys how I would draw that, something similar to that. And my process, how I do it, I'm going to break it down for you. So the way that I do it now, because I've been doing it for so long, is not 100% the same as if I was doing it as a beginner. But I'm going to do the drawing first, and then I'm going to break it down for those of you out there who are new or are struggling with foreshortening. I'm going to break down how to essentially look at it as a couple of basic shapes, circles and tubes, because that's essentially all it is. If you look at it, when you break it down to its basics, that's what I'm going to do. So I'm going to move this screen to one side, and then I'm going to get started on the video. This one's going to be playing at 1:1. So this is the speed in which I draw it. So without further ado, here we go. So my initial drawing here, you can see, is literally just I suppose if you want to call it a gesture drawing of an arm that's been foreshortened. You can see foreground where I've roughed in fingers, in the middle ground where I've roughed in a forearm, and in the sort of further in the background where I've roughed in the deltoids, triceps, all that sort of stuff. So I'm just going through now and quickly throwing in some lines of where I think everything is and should be. What I'm doing now, that's your forearm, that's your brachioradialis, and that usually sort of tends to stick over and runs all the way down to roughly where the elbow joint is. That's on top of your forearm, just here. In comics, obviously, we have a little bit of artistic license, and we can make it a little more chunky, a little more, I don't know, exaggerate the anatomy a little bit more. So your arm obviously won't look like this unless you're lucky enough to be a bodybuilder. Then your arm may look exactly like this, but I'm just roughing in where I think the shadows might go. You see your horseshoe in the middle is, that I'm working on it right now, is the back of the tricep, down into the little point underneath it where is the elbow, bottom of the forearm, and then in the very foreground is the hands, and I'll show you how I rough in the hand as well, the structure of the hand. It doesn't need to be, hands are a bit of a complicated thing. They're not they're not particularly fun for most people. I don't struggle too badly with hands, but the easiest way to get your head around it is to practice it and to understand the anatomy of how a hand works, and then you can sort of make it work from there. I rough in the knuckles on one side, and then I just use a nice sweep for the underside of it. So it's not necessarily broken down to knuckles on the underside. I'll rough in the knuckles on the top, and then I'll just tend to throw in a nice sweep, just like that one there. Pop in the knuckles at the top there. Later I'll come back and throw in the fingernails. I'm also mindful of where that first knuckle is and how those tendons that attach and go down into your wrist sort of would work. As I'm going through, do the same thing. The third finger, 1, 2, and 3 knuckles, and then a sweep. I'm going to rough in the knuckles again, and then I'll do the bottom one. I'm going to have this curled up slightly. And it's not a perfect hand by any means, but you can see what I'm trying to do. It gets the point across. You understand what it is, what each shape is meant to represent. Is this tendons I was talking about. And I'm probably going to go back and rough in, there we go, the bracket, rough in the knuckles. So I'm not drawing this, obviously, as I'm talking over the recording. This is something that I recorded during the week. I recorded a couple of videos during the week on foreshortening, so next week I'm hoping to get another lesson out to you guys on foreshortening arms again. I'm just roughing in where the thumb might be. You can see it's not a perfect foreshortened arm by any means. The hand, now that I'm looking at it again, the hand is probably a little bit, I don't know, it's not quite 100% right, but you get the point. And you know, if I was putting this into a book, it would get the point across that this is an arm that's coming at you, it is foreshortened, and you know, so now I'm breaking it down into shapes for you. So I'm throwing in another layer, circle on top of a circle on top of a circle on top of a circle. It doesn't get much simpler than that. So roughing in the shape of the hand. So this is breaking down the structure of how it looks when it's foreshortened for you. So if I turn that layer off, you'll see now that it is literally, the structure of how to foreshorten is literally just a circle on top of a circle on top of a circle. So I'll do it in reverse this time. Circle, 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 hand. And you'll see the very far at the back there is the deltoid, the shoulder, and then the middle is the bicep and tricep, and the biggest circle out of the three that I drew is a forearm, because as things get closer to you, they tend to get larger. But as I was saying before, in a lot of the artwork that I do, things that are foreshortened, you know, a superhero or a warrior, whatever it is that I'm drawing, they tend to have exaggerated anatomy. So I do tend to, when I'm doing these things, exaggerate the size of their shoulders and all that sort of stuff to, you know, give them that heroic, you know, look that I'm going for here. So I'm just roughing in where I think the anatomy should go. Bicep, tricep, elbow. I'll put in a little point for the elbow so I know what I'm looking at and where I should be taking the forearm anatomy from. I'd like to do a video in the future on anatomy and what everything's called and how it works and why it is what it is and where it comes from and all that sort of stuff. But you don't need to be an expert on the names of everything in anatomy. You just sort of, it's more important to understand where everything sits. And if someone's talking to you about something related to anatomy, you will understand what they're talking about. So if you sat down today, I sat down with my friend Ben, shout out to Ben. If he watches this, he's a PT, and we always get together and have good talks about biohacking and anatomy and functionality and all that sort of stuff. So if you're ever sitting in a room where you're surrounded by people who are into that type of thing, health, fitness, anatomy, you know, whatever their job might be, even physios or anything like that, then you can sort of hang with those guys because you'll understand what they're talking about. So here you'll see I'm roughing in where I think the fingers might want to go. Slightly different arrangement to the way I did the first hand. I think from memory, yeah, I'm just going to shorten these fingers up a little bit. So I'm kind of at a different stage of reaching for something, for an object, reaching towards a person, someone's face, whatever. It's a little more relaxed in the hand. It's not so stiff and desperate. It is a little more subtle. Rough in the fingernails. Something I do tend to miss out a little bit when I do my hands is I sort of tend to forget that there are fingernails on your fingers. So there you go, that's another one. So now I'm going to break down what the arm looks like when it's dead straight from the side. So first circle is your shoulder. Second movement is a tube which comes out, which is for your bicep and tricep. Forearm muscle tends to come, people don't realize, but the forearm muscle, brachialis and brachioradialis in this case, that first bit that I drew is brachialis, comes up almost right below where the deltoid inserts. So this is the bottom of the forearm, roughing in the line for the hand. I've roughly made the proportions halfway between the shoulder and the wrist is where your elbow point will be. In this case, I think that's a little bit too long and I'm going to go back and fix it up in a second. So just adjusting the size of things, where everything inserts, but essentially that's your basic arm from the side. That's the same armor that I just drew, but in a different, less dynamic position. So I'm going to go back in and rough in where everything's come from. So forearms, tricep. This is your long head of your tricep. Sweep comes up into shoulder. Your anterior deltoid will come up from there, which is that little line there, suggesting. And this will be medial. From the side, you'll probably see mostly medial deltoid from the side, which is the line that I've stuck in there is showing the break between the medial and the posterior deltoid. Now I'm roughing in the bicep. Forearm will come next after that, which is your brachioradialis. And like I said before, the brachioradialis sort of comes right down to roughly where the elbow. So I'm drawing in my lines there because I knew my proportion was off. Stopping my wrist a little shorter. There we go. And there's the bottom part of your forearm and your bones. It'll be coming out from there. As your forearm comes essentially down to where the point where the elbow hinges. Your brachioradialis will come right down to there, and a couple of your forearm extensors going in there as well. So that's the same thing. It's just from a different angle. So you're looking at it deadly from the side, roughing in the second head. That's your short head of your tricep. Tricep called tricep because there are 3 heads. Bicep is called a bicep because there are 2 heads. So that's the same thing, just showing you essentially where everything goes from the side. And if you can imagine the way that I drew that before, foreshortened it, I've had to layer those things on top of each other. So the hand sits in front of the forearm. The most prominent arm in the forearm, prominent muscle in the arm in the forearm is your brachioradialis and your brachioradialis, and then your bicep and tricep, and then your deltoid will be in behind that. So you've got 3 layers. And I suppose we draw it like this because it's far more exciting to look at and more dynamic to foreshorten something than it is just to draw something really basic from the side. From the side, it's just super boring when you look at something from the side. So you see a lot of guys to create a little bit of excitement and tension, we'll draw things foreshortened or so on, so that they can sort of make something a little bit more exciting to look at. And this is me just looking at, okay, I wasn't 100% happy with the way that I drew the arm. So I started to rough in maybe where some of the anatomy might sort of come in and insert, maybe looking a little bit different than the first one, because I didn't feel I'd quite resolved it in my head when I drew it. And also when I draw these things, I generally don't tend to break them down and draw them in shapes before I do it when I'm drawing naturally or normally now, because I've just done it so many times. For those of you guys who are starting out, you'll find that you may need to, draw it 5, 6, 10, 100,000 times before you feel like you're comfortable and have gotten it right. All right, for some reason, QuickTime keeps crashing, so apologies if this is a bit of a rough edit, but that's essentially the nuts and bolts of how I do my foreshortening stuff. So it's not something that is always easy to do for a lot of people. A lot of people struggle with foreshortening, and understandably, because it's not the easiest thing in the world to do. These days, I mean, honestly, I've never really found it that difficult because I just think about things as shapes as I was drawing them before I put a line down. I'm sort of thinking in my head about where is this going to go and how do I want this to look. So, and understanding how your anatomy works in certain, when it's twisted or at different angles and all that kind of thing will definitely help as well. And then it's just practice from that point onwards. So if you're following along or it's something that you think you want to learn a little more, then just sit down with a pen and paper. That's the point, in your sketchbook, that's the point of a sketchbook, is to make mistakes. The sketchbook is not supposed to be, a finished product. It's not supposed to be a refined drawing. A sketchbook is where you can go to feel safe to make mistakes. Sketchbooks are there to learn, to understand, to build muscle memory, all that type of thing. So if you're not drawing every day, then that's the best way to get better. Keep doing that every single day, even if it's just 10 minutes. It doesn't matter. To get good at something, you've got to do that thing over and over and over and over. And to get good at things that are a little more complicated, like foreshortening, same thing, repeat the process over and over and over and over. It doesn't have to be right, but you will do it at one point. You might be 10, 15, 150 drawings deep, and then you draw it and you'll go, nailed it. That's the one there. And from that point onwards, once you understand and you've got that drawing where you're happy with it once, it's a matter of learning to repeat that process, throwing those lines until it becomes part of your muscle memory, and then it's just a matter of you can just sort of pull it out whenever you feel the urge, or if wherever you need to. You don't have to always refer back to something. But having said that, there's absolutely nothing wrong with referring to reference, with referring to videos like these, which is kind of the point of what I'm doing and why I'm doing it, is because it's a reference tool for myself, a reference tool for artists, a reference tool for people who are interested in what I do, or interested in getting better at whatever their chosen field is. So it's a quick breakdown, and feel free to go back and watch it 10 times again, because there may have been things that I forgot to cover. But it's just as simple as breaking it down to circle, straight, circle, straight, circle, straight. So shoulders a circle, bicep, tricep, circle, it's bad, forearm, circle, there's another tube, and then your hand. So if that's the case, just keep practicing that over and over again, and you just lay in your circles wherever you want those parts of your anatomy to sit on top of each other in foreshortening. So if you want them to be slightly more further apart from each other, just lay the circles in a little further apart from each other, and then join the dots, join the lines, join the circles. So that's it, guys. That's a quick breakdown on the way that I do foreshortening. I hope it was helpful. If you've got any questions about it, please feel free to pop them into the comments section, or hit me at my socials, which are all linked. I think I'm going to do another video next week on foreshortening again, and I'm still getting used to how all this works, and for some reason, I don't know why, but QuickTime just decided twice during this recording to crash or not work for some silly reason. So fingers crossed, when it comes time to editing it, it won't be too choppy for you. So once again, like, comment, subscribe. I am Brad Van Geest. I am the Killustrator. Thank you again for joining me in this video too. Hopefully many more videos to come, but that is me signing off. Thanks again, guys.